now that is happening. So meeting is yours.
Mayor, you want to take it away?
I was going to hand it off to you, Commissioner, but I can if you want, either way.
Yeah, go ahead and take it away, Mayor.
Okay, do you need me to do an official like opening of the meeting? And
I don't think so.
okay.
No, this is pretty informal. I mean, it's a subcommittee of C4 in theory. So, and it's even ad hoc to that degree. So I think as long as you have the group that's been assigned to this and I'll bring more in as they come in, like Councilor Lewis just showed up, but it doesn't require like an official vote. It's not really a voting committee until it makes a recommendation up to the big C4 body.
Excellent. Well, as Trent just mentioned, today's proposed agenda is in the chat. So you can open that up. And our first item on the agenda is ODOT and regional partner commitments and role of C4 diversion subcommittee discussion. Check for clarity and understanding. So we can start with that unless you like to start with introductions. We can just go around. I'm Mayor Walters, from West Lynn, and we also have Councilor Sherman from Happy Valley. And we have Garrett Pryor from ODOT. And Commissioner Marl, who was on my last couple of meetings today. Nice to see you again, from Oregon City. And we have Councilor Baumgardner, who I'm lucky to have here in West Lynn. Christine Sacco, remind me, Kristen, what Tualatin, thank you very much. And then we have Commissioner Savas, County Commissioner. Metro Councilor Christine Lewis. And then Heather Wills, remind me your title again.
I'm on the toll project with Garrett.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I'm the project manager.
Thank you. And Councilor Lassen from River Grove, this time I got it right? Thank you. And then we also have Paul Comery.
Comrie, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. So let's go ahead. Do you want to kick it off, Trent, with this first agenda item topic?
Sure. And before I do, I'll just say we're always in a state of learning here at Clackamas County. And so one thing that's happening with our Zoom rooms right now, with all Zoom rooms, is that in these webinar series, if you're in a camera's not turned on, for example, the folks in the attendee group don't know that you're present in the meeting. And so doesn't mean that you need to turn your camera on. It's certainly available for those folks to know that you're there. But it's also helpful to those folks if you're a staff person, and even if you are an elected official, to expand on your name, to have a title, kind of the way that Garrett has done, or I'm doing. So at the front of our Zoom meetings moving forward, I'm going to try to incorporate a much more condensed version of what I'm sharing now, just so that the folks in the attendees group can see with more transparency who's in these meetings. And so I'll work on that introduction moving forward. But here's a good chance to start that conversation today, and a good practice for me. The first meeting, and I'll punt to Garrett, is a conversation about ODOT regional partner commitments and the role of C4 diversion subcommittee. So I'll sort of help Garrett in the introduction here. Is this group was put together because there wasn't such a group that existed yet, and diversion is one of the primary concerns by our communities throughout Clackamas County and along the I-205 corridor. And as ODOT was doing their research and study and modeling around data and diversion impacting the communities along the I-205 corridor, many of y'all wanted to take a deeper dive into that work and have more access to that information as it was coming out. So that is why this group was formed, but there's still been some uncertainty about what this group will do in terms of how it will help influence the direction that ODOT takes. And some of that direction will come from the draft commitments that are being considered with the I-205 RTP, which has not been finalized yet at the Metro table. That is still ongoing. And a little bit of that was shared this morning at C4 Metro. But in short, the decision to approve or not the RTP amendments for I-205 sits at the Metro Council table. It was tabled last week, and it sounds like it will continue to be tabled at least for another week or so. And Councilor Lewis can speak to that item or not, or she can. She's raising her hand to do it.
I believe I believe we might be taking up as soon as next Tuesday, if not next Tuesday, next Thursday. We cannot delay it for the several weeks we were hoping to have it be in alignment with the additional money, because that vote actually needs to go, that package needs to go back to the OTC before they can begin construction.
So there you go. There is a timeline for this group to be thinking about. But I was working with Garrett and some of our other staff that these commitments that are tacked on to this RTP amendment is a great place to start for this group to determine if there's an intersection with this group and those commitments to see how we can influence, or y'all can influence, the decision process and delivery process for ODOT. So Garrett, I'll let you expand on that.
Yeah, excellent. And Paul, do you mind bringing up the presentation? And before we do that, Paul did have his baby with him. And so we do bring babies along because, we're talking tolling. So we got to get the babies in for a good start to the conversation. So thanks, Paul, for taking one for the team there. I'll bring my 3-year-old daughter, Ellington. She'll join the next one just so we can have some fun. So like Trent said, those ODOT and regional partner commitments aren't codified or put down yet. But we're showing up here to just say that we're not going to, go away, that document is a living one, and one that we're going to use this forum here, the C4 Diversion Subcommittee, to show you that we're going to be held accountable for those and really kind of focus on the details and make sure they get accomplished. So that's the update. I'm joined by Heather, and then Nicole. I think she actually might be in the attendees. I saw her here as well. So next slide. So we sent that document around. That was included. We sent it over to Trent. I believe he sent it out for this meeting here today. And again, it kind of highlights like 6 major areas and then details on how we're going to accomplish those and the timing on when we would accomplish that. Next slide. So the C4 Diversion Subcommittee, we talked about this last month. But really, we see the role of this group right here being kind of 2 really important pieces of it. Prioritizing and the timing of investments or actions to mitigate the impacts of diversion or rerouting. I'll have an update real quick on where that information is coming here in a second. And then what I hoped we could talk about the majority of our time talking about today is what should be in that long-term monitoring diversion plan and coordination with ODOT for once tolls are in place. Because we very much see it. I know Commissioner Savas, you had mentioned before that this shouldn't be just a ODOT, hey, we're gonna monitor the numbers and then wave goodbye or not be there. We really do see it as a partnership and a place where we can join with the county and local governments to make sure that we're not just tracking it, but also stepping in or finding areas of partnership to address those impacts in the future. Next slide. So that kind of, I won't go over the membership piece of it. I'm just kind of re-communicating that out for transparency. We did have a slight adjustment. So the difficulty with some of these larger environmental projects is that you're drafting an environmental review document to very much meet the needs of all of you and the people in the community, but also we have Federal Highway Administration that reviews it at each step. And sometimes the way they like things written or how it's analyzed or framed is very different than how the public would want it, because they're reviewing it for their own kind of more technical audience. And so we've had some delays with them in this past month on some of the transportation analysis. So we were hoping to bring that intersection in 2027 analysis to you this month. That's going to be delayed a month till next month, but that information is coming. And I think I remember last time we were here, Commissioner Savas, Councilor Sherman, we talked about kind of a deep dive to jump into that data. That's going to be, that's why we're delaying just a little bit. We need to get through with FHWA to then have that data to have the conversation. And so that may put that draft environmental analysis. We were planning on June, maybe that might push that into July, but we are hoping this summer, that's when that larger document, that draft environmental analysis goes out. And so prior to that, we'd be working with local cities, the transit providers and others to figure out what are those mitigation options or potential mitigation. Next slide. So here's just really quickly the timeline. And I wanted to highlight that August-September timeframe for when we would hope this C4 diversion subcommittee would make a recommendation on what are those two elements we talked about at the very start. What is the short-term and then the long-term plan that ODOT is proposing for diversion mitigation and monitoring. And so that's where we would really hope to work with this group or the larger C4 as well, is to help develop that recommendation between now and September. And what that'll do, that recommendation will then go to the regional toll committee. And then that heads to the OTC as far as kind of the communication path. But that we're hoping that we can hit that in September, because then that'll inform any final adjustments ODOT would have to make before we try to get a final review from Federal Highways by December of this year. So next slide. So I'm going to pause again, just quick, like Trent set it up. This is what we hope that this group really can be a powerful and a clear force in providing that local touch point and voice on those, in providing recommendations on long and short-term mitigation and diversion. So I just want to pause to check for clarity and understanding on that. And then what's the type of information or support that ODOT can provide to help, to help achieve that goal, if that's something we want to, y'all want to pursue.
Well, I'm happy to input here, Garrett. I would like to see basically, this is, the tolling's been done around the country. And it seems to me that there ought to be really a shopping list, so to speak, if you want to call it that, of solutions for diversion or designs that serve as mitigation or solutions for diversion or rerouting. And it'd be nice to really have that toolbox to know what's being done out there. I know I have personal experiences of other parts of the country where I've seen those.
Yep.
And but there again, I don't know what's possible in this corridor that may not may not be possible in this corridor versus maybe possible somewhere else in the corridor, right? More in the urban setting along I-5 or north to 205 or the northern part of 205, that is. So to me, I think that would be helpful for all of us. If there's not really a solution or a path, I guess I struggle with our role in a meaningful way, because mitigation is one thing, a solution is something different.
Yeah, and I think what you'll see the start of today, Commissioner Savas, because you're totally right, it is pulling in a real world example of a long-term monitoring program that Heather and I are going to speak to. But yeah, we can start to bring forward kind of what is ODOT going to bring to the plate, and then we'd love to hear back from you all on your feedback, your judgment, your take on, is that enough? That's what we're hoping to set up as far as the conversation and your recommendation.
Yeah, maybe just a quick comment as well. Excuse me. I think from my perspective, what I think will be helpful ultimately, right now we kind of have a lack of inputs to even kind of start formulating what the issues will be that we'll be able to review. And so, and so much of this for me at least is kind of the I don't know, is this like a Dick Cheney phrase? It's the unknown unknowns. As we look at things like the increased cost of the 205 improvements brings into question then, does that impact the tolling, cost structure? Does that reduce the amount of money that we have available at the, diversion and mitigation level, or is there some other calculation? And so I think as we start to hone in on more applicable, Donald Rumsfeld, thank you very much. As we start to hone in on more applicable data, that may help us kind of better understand what the impacts will be. And I think, too, I'm still struggling with the notion of, a lot of the modeling that you're going to do near term is going to identify potential diversion issues in advance or the potential for them. So, I'm really curious kind of about the timeline of, it feels like what we're saying is we'll monitor it. If it's broken, we'll attempt to fix it. And I'm looking to better understand, if we identify that it's potentially going to occur in an area, how do we proactively look, without spending a lot of money on the infrastructure because you don't know what's going to happen. How do you kind of balance that, the before versus after type scenario?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this? I mean, just a few things that sparked in my mind would be thinking about how we line up like some of the technical staff and others who can do like just quick cost estimates on what it costs to implement. Like you said, Councilor Sherman, like what would that cost come in the future? And is that something we want to tack on to the toll rate, therefore having a higher toll rate and we get more mitigations to do throughout the community? Or is it something that we'd prefer to take a lower toll rate and hopefully monitor it, and maybe we don't have to incur that cost? I think, those are the types of questions that we'll have to go through as well. And so we can bring those here.
Sure. I mean, I think, one of the things I'm just, still very curious about, because I am new to this process, is, so I would assume as a layperson, the impact of a $1 per gantry toll is going to be very different on diversion than a $5 per gantry toll. And so that's really why, it would be great to have at some point, a one-page executive summary. Here's generally the cost of the project. Here are the inputs. Here's what we expect the inputs could be at this level, this level, this level. Here are the requirements that we have for covering the project costs, for diversion mitigation, and just kind of some simple projections, like what are the ranges that we're looking at? That to me would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Baumgartner.
Sorry, thank you. I couldn't unmute. Thank you. I have a question that's occurring to me because tonight I know that the Planning Commission is going to be discussing, among other things, the potential for a roundabout that's being added onto Willamette Falls Drive. Well, there will be a couple eventually, but one I'm concerned about is in front of the new school that the school district is building. And I wondered if there's an engineer who's from ODOT who's working with someone at the city and communicating with the potential impacts of, for instance, this roundabout on the flow if you add in diversion traffic on top of that, which we can't really plan for right now because it's not happening, but will be. Are there engineers communicating with each other on things like that? Or is that something I need to be, we need to, as city officials present at this meeting, be bringing forward to our city?
Hopefully it will not be on you. I mean, so we have been we just met with the school district folks earlier the week because we had a presentation at Bolton Elementary last night. And so we were talking with them about what are the issues that you saw with the new school planning, specifically there in Westland in that area. And then we're working with city staff. And I think we even were looking at that proposed roundabout on Willamette Falls Drive and the design of that and talking through it on the toll team. So what I'm hoping that happens in these next couple months is that when we have that intersection in 2027 level data, we'll come to you with a list of here are X number of intersections where we want to talk about what should be done and what are the options. What do the counties and cities have on the books today? Is that the right fit? Is that meeting it and kind of work through that? And if there are things as we talk through those, that we don't know about or haven't mentioned, that would be great for you to bring in. But I don't think the onus should be on this group at all to help, do that kind of investigation. That'll be on us.
Is a meeting like the one you mentioned last night open to the public, or is that just for specific stakeholders?
Open to the public. When neighborhood associations, others reach out to us, we schedule meetings like that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then Mayor Walters, I think you had your hand up quick. And then.
I did for a second, but it's, I think it's what's been said already many times is I think the reason it's hard to sort of find a toolkit for this type of diversion is because this is such an odd way to toll, where there are so many avenues for diversion. I mean, I lived in San Francisco for a long time, and you can't drive your car through the San Francisco Bay, so they toll you at the bridge because you have no opportunity to get to the other side. unless you pay the toll and cross the bridge. This one, you just can get off everywhere. And so I think it's it feels uncomfortable to me, not in a personal way, Garrett. I mean,
Yeah.
But it feels uncomfortable to me that you're asking for us to provide you with solutions when really that's your job, right?
Yeah.
And you're the engineers, you're the planners, you're the designers. You've chosen this model of tolling this entire corridor with multiple entries and exits. And now you're asking us to solve the diversion problem. And I kind of see like it should be going the other way around.
Oh, sure. And I would say, I agree. It is the other way around. I think what I'm trying to couch, and maybe I didn't do a great job of communicating, is that we don't want to just create the ODOT solution in a vacuum. That we want your feedback on what are these impacts that we're showing that are going to occur, and what's the best solution in these areas that we would bring. Because ODOT will have to bring to the table solutions to mitigate those impacts to reach that federal review that's at the end of the year. It needs to be a full finding of no significant impact. And so there will be a set of solutions, a set of investments ODOT brings. We need your feedback on what are the right ones. And I think our biggest challenge is, just real quickly, and then I'll get to you, Commissioner Savis, is going back to what Councilor Sherman said. There's a lot of existing needs in this area. And so what is going to be the role of tolling to fulfill those? You know, because our analysis is going to show what's the difference between 2045 tolling and investing or not. But it's not going to account for the underinvestment or years of disinvestment or lack of, bike ped transit or additional roadway capacity, that's needed. And so that's going to be a challenge. Yeah, Commissioner Seves?
Yeah, Garrett, thank you. Don't take this the wrong way. I want to see this committee succeed and continue. So don't take this the wrong way. But we don't have really much to work with. We really talk about the role. It seems to me if we had approval authority, that would be certainly part of the role. If we had a means or which to either craft agreements or get information on a timely basis as we ask for it, that would be great to review and analyze. But we've had several meetings and we've asked a lot of questions, but we haven't got very much in the way of answers. And I do know from discussions and things that occurred this morning and previously, what the Metro Council is considering is trying to get an agreement or crafting something to cope with this. We were initially told that, you could use toll revenues to pay for transit. And we find out we can't pay for transit. So, we see here solutions, then they're dashed, right? So it seems like everything's changing and nothing's really staying the same, but we really don't, this committee should have some kind of a role, I think, an important role in either saying up or down, yes or no. We met the mark. And again, we craft an agreement that kind of binds us all together to say that once we get there, we can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But if we're just going to be presented to and have the answers be pushed off, again, don't take this personal, just pushed off or have the answers change substantially, doesn't give us much to bite onto as far as a role. Yeah.
Well, I hope that the things we can control are getting answers to your questions. I think that's something we can do better at. And I do see, although, I haven't had direction or authority as far as decision-making power on some of this stuff to convey out to different groups. But I think that's your opportunity in developing a recommendation is a thumbs up or a thumbs down on how close did we get to hitting the mark on ODOT's plan for short-term and long-term mitigation. And I think the discussion I hope we get to here just in a minute about that long-term mitigation and monitoring piece. The example from Seattle is a group like this that convenes around toll rate setting adjustments, and it's built into the process for how the Washington Transportation Commission decides on toll rate adjustments. So I think there's opportunities coming, and I think we can do a better job at the pieces we can control.
Yeah, and I'll just end this with this last comment, and that is that the people that made the decision to make this happen don't live anywhere near this corridor. And that's problematic, okay? And I was very struck here just a few weeks ago when Don Hamilton, who I like, your PIO, I guess, for ODOT, was talking about the 217 corridor, you know, and all the work going on there. And his comments were, it's on a news piece. His comments were, this 217 work is going to be a state-of-the-art facility with a frontage road. And I would argue that ODOT's reputation is on the line for this being the first tolled section in the region, right? And it's not anywhere near close to being state-of-the-art of anything. All that is state-of-the-art is extraction. That's the only state, that's the only technology I really see is how to extract the dollars. And again, don't take any of that personal, but it doesn't seem to me, this is the worst section to toll. So we have a lot of work. We need a lot of revenue to get it done and no tools to do that.
Yeah, Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Lachine.
Sure. I just want to kind of pick up on the thread that there's got to be a balance. You know, you just referenced Seattle, and they have a regional table, not a state table, that sets the rates, or at least negotiates the rates. And from every communication I've had, the rates well above any of our pay grades here at this conversation. It's only the OTC, and maybe the OTC can be advised by a statewide committee that might have one or two people who live in the region. That's not adequate. So I'm glad that we've moved away from ODOT wanting to put together a statewide committee before giving us a local committee. Local has to come first. And yes, we have to recognize that actions that we recommend are going to need to be scalable, or at least are going to need to be precedent setting and translatable to other projects in the future. But we got to get this one right. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just super frustrated because I've heard a lot of movement over the past year. It's taken a lot of work from a lot of faces in these boxes. It's taken a lot of work from my staff. My staff are burnt out from every week having to talk about diversion impact projects. And it's not the bread and butter of your agency. I respect that, but it is what is going to make the difference in our local communities. And yet we still don't know what kind of global budget we're looking at. Is there only $10 million for diversionary impact? Okay, there's $10 million. Is that going to 2 projects? How do we decide which 2 out of 50? Right. So while it's a frame of scarcity, you have to understand we're all like sharks with blood in the water. If there was more transparency about a global budget, we would actually be able to move forward in a more predictable and, you know, dare I say, grown-up manner. But right now we're sticking together because that's the only way we can. But we have to make sure that there is some clarity sometime soon about what we can expect for localized revenues that will be available for these first projects out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd say I think what's been kind of the frustrating point is that we can't exact that information until we get to our traffic and revenue analysis study, and that's what's coming here in the draft environmental analysis up in the next couple of months. That's why we needed the RTP amendment to provide that funding to run the numbers to get you those more specific things on what are the revenue estimates we're understanding from this, and what's the balance between kind of what goes to the 205 improvements project, which is the modernization that's being brought to this area, versus what gets added on as mitigation, and then what gets added on, maybe we go even further with mitigation, but then that would require a higher toll rate. So that's the discussion. I hope the elements that you were just saying there, Councilor Lewis, are what we get to here in the next 3 to 4 months. That's what I see. But I do understand that it's frustrating that it's taken this long to get to that point. Councilor Lacine.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to reinforce the points that have been made. And I think, Garrett, your message to us about sort of the underinvestment in the areas around I-205, that's sort of been a long-term situation. And given this project, it's now become very critical or acute maybe. And how do we actually deal with that? Given sort of the limitation that we have, because I keep hearing that the diversion or mitigation actually is linked back to the toll rate. And I just think, you know, that kind of equation or relationship is not going to be acceptable or very effective in terms of coming out with a model tolling effort for the state of Oregon. So I just want to reinforce what everyone's already said. Where we are right now is not where we need to be at all. The other thing I wanted to ask is, since there is a diversion committee that exists in Seattle, is there information that you can share with us? Or is there access to that information that would be useful for us to be looking at?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, what I wanted to do, and maybe, Paul, could you bring it back up the PowerPoint? What I wanted to do was real quickly take what you just said, that train of thought, and talk through what have we heard today from people from the cities here and others on what needs to be included in this long-term monitoring program. And then Heather, if you're okay, I know she was a little under the help today, but if Heather's up to it, I wanted her to talk through that example from Washington and how it works there. And then we kind of pause for discussion on, what about the factors? Did you not like, what else is needed type thing. So you can go to the next slide, Paul. So in that commitments document, again, we're not at a place where, we can have OTC kind of codify what this would be, but we are going through the process of gathering what would that long-term toll monitoring program look like. And so we've heard the bullet points you see here on the screen from the Clackamas County staff and the cities around performance measures to track goals and diversion patterns, and accountability structure, especially for local governments, and commitments to equity, a plan to work with communities kind of long-term in coordination to address those impacts. We've heard things specifically, and the bullet points got messed up there a little bit, but the thought of if there are more increased crashes on local roads, what does that do to police response or incident management? Do those services go up? What about traffic flows and the cost to a locality and managing those locally if there's this now long-term, like more consistent diversion program? What's some technical support to help looking through that? And then would there be other kind of, cost systems or allocations that go directly to cities or localities for, long-term, diversion mitigation support? So these are the ideas that we've heard about so far in the bucket. Next slide. And then also a part of those commitments is it kind of just, I've just pulled this up to just kind of say it's reorienting, re-saying that we, this is what we will accomplish through the 205 toll project, is to have this conversation that we're having here today to talk through the prioritization, short and long term, of the mitigation and diversion plan. So next slide. So Heather, are you okay to talk about it, or do you just want?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys could understand me, sorry, my voice is maybe will last enough. So we chatted with the folks up at WashDOT, and one of the things, well, let me back up. SR 520 had 3 different stages of tolling. They tolled the existing bridge prior to construction. Then they tolled the existing bridge during construction, and then they tolled the new bridge after construction. So this monitoring program was developed when they first implemented tolling on the existing bridge before construction even started. So they developed a local stakeholder group, and they committed to having ongoing conversations as well as monitoring what the traffic patterns actually look like on the ground. And I don't have all the information, and I can definitely get what they have from them and share with this group. I think it would be really helpful. But they did do like an existing conditions study, like what does it look like before? And then as soon as tolling was implemented, they started monitoring the local routes to see how traffic patterns might change from the implementation of tolling. And then they had, I want to say it was about weekly or bi-weekly conversations sharing that information with the with the community members, the stakeholders. And I think it was a combination of elected officials as well as neighborhood groups that were made up this, the local stakeholder committee that they had conversations with. So, I mean, what they found is that the fears around diversion were not as, they weren't realized in the SR 520 example. So take that, you know, with a grain of salt. It's a little bit different. But they did find that diversion, the fears around like what it would look like, didn't actually come to fruition. And it was really helpful to have that ongoing monitoring and conversation around that. So I'll try to get as much information as I can related to the stakeholder group, as well as how often they met and what kind of documentation they have around what that monitoring program looked like, to share with this group. And one thing, just, I was listening to the conversation a little bit earlier and I was going to jump in, but there wasn't a great point. So the toll rate is related to diversion because it is what drives the traffic pattern. So if you have a toll rate at 50 cents versus $5, you might choose to go through the 50-cent toll, but might not choose to go through the $5 toll. So that's how you're going to see the impact of diversion. We have a funding goal that we need to meet. So we've developed a toll rate schedule that would help us meet that funding goal. If there are impacts and we keep the toll rates through all the level 2 traffic and revenue studies, as well as the investment grade analysis, in the NEPA process that we are in right now, if there are impacts, we have to mitigate them. So the notion of, oh, do we have this much money or this much money? That could be an amount of money that would be needed for something that's extra. But if we have an impact, ODOT has to mitigate it. So the money has to be found somewhere. You commit to that in your NEPA document. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If you can't implement the mitigation that mitigates the impact that has been caused, the project doesn't move forward. Does that make sense? Because I felt like there was a little bit of mixing of things. There might be projects that ODOT decides they want to like include as part of the toll project that are above and beyond. And that might be a budgetary thing, but not the impacts that have to be mitigated and get committed to.
So that was basically our last slide. We were going to go to discussion, but I saw Councilor Lewis, you had your hand raised, and then Councilor Lucine, you have yours up still, but go ahead. Christine.
Yeah, I guess, Heather, it makes sense and it doesn't make sense at the same time. And the place where it doesn't make sense is that there's not a shared understanding of the baseline you're comparing it to, because time and time again, we have heard diversion's already been a problem off of 205. And okay, diversion's already been a problem at peak hours. Non-peak hours, it's slightly different most times. So are you only modeling for, I mean, if we're looking at only peak times, what is the remedy for non-peak times and vice versa? Similarly, our communities actually don't want those impacts. And we would like this to be a remedy that makes it better, not just keeps it status quo of the problems that we've seen develop over the past decade. So until we understand what that baseline really is for your NEPA, peak, off peak, truly the livable community that we want to see versus kind of the hell we've already been living through, and the hell we're definitely going to live through during construction. We're like eyes wide open that construction is going to cause hell. That doesn't make sense.
And I think that's what will help clarify some of that, I think, is the data we said we were going to bring on 2027 and some of those more short-term impacts coming up here pretty soon. So Commissioner Savos, I'll go to you. I think the last slide that Paul was going to show up and really where I'd like to spend our last 20 minutes, if possible, are what did you think about that example from Washington? What would a local committee group like that, what would be needed to make that successful? And then beyond those bullet points that I walked through that we already have captured today in the ODOT commitments list, what are other factors that you would like to see a part of this kind of long-term, we'll call it a monitoring partnership instead of a program. Maybe that's a friendlier word. But like, what would you like to see as a part of that? So Commissioner Savas, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I just want to build on Councilor Lewis's comments. We've raised this before. What is the baseline? And I think when he asked a question, we heard that the diversion or the traffic levels were based on 2019, which we've made the argument, well, that's unacceptable because it was unacceptable then. We should be looking at 2010 numbers, for example, or maybe during times where COVID, where there was no diversion. So I'm just concerned that the modeling that was done was based off of 2019, which is problematic. And I've also heard you all say, or ODOT's staff say, not here to say who said what when, but is that we will raise the cost of the toll based on congestion. And then today I'm hearing we'll raise or lower the cost based on diversion. Well, they're two opposites, right? I mean, if you push people off the freeway, it's going to be diversion. If you're trying to reduce congestion on the freeway, it's congestion pricing. So is the strategy going to be different for 129 versus RMPP congestion pricing? Or is the variable piece again assigned to 129? Which is it? Is it both?
It's both. There's variation though. So if you go to the purpose and need for the 205 toll project or for the regional mobility project, it's the balancing goals of revenue generation and congestion management. But here for 205, we have a specific capital target. We've got to pay for the I-205 improvements. And so because you have to hit that, it then factors in so that's kind of underneath that goal. That's a clarifying kind of orienting piece. You've got to pay for the improvements and you've got to pay for the mitigations. Now, on the other side of that equation, okay, how can we dial this in to manage congestion? It is the balancing goal of trying to limit that diversion because you don't want to run your mitigation cost up, but also manage congestion at those peak times. So for the 205 section, it will be the variable price where 4 to 6 p.m., 7 to 9 a.m., it's your higher prices. And then in off-peak times, you have lower or no price whatsoever. The environmental study is going to show a 60-cent price kind of all throughout the night and all throughout the day because we want to study that to understand where are there, the impacts. But that might not be what it ends up being. It might be dropped to zero just because we're finding that the benefits don't outweigh the cost of, collecting that 60 cents at 1 a.m. type thing.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, I'm not really sure that 520 model is defined well enough to say that I like it or don't like it. Again, just all we saw was a map. We didn't see a composition of a committee or what that looked like, but more along the lines of it's a big, huge body of water that 520 goes over, right? And our situation is a little bit more unique. There's probably a dozen ways that I can get from where I live in Milwaukee to Wilsonville or Salem. There's at least a dozen different pathways I can take and divert, just like anyone else will. And I'm sure that number just explodes. So is it really a fair apples for apples comparison from at least the map you showed us there, the little diagram you showed us?
Probably some elements yes, some elements no, but I think we'll bring, like you're saying, we'll bring you a shopping menu, a best practices list of what other communities that look like this have been around the country. I used to work in Hampton, Virginia. I think it's pretty similar to where we're doing here, where there's some rivers that traverse that kind of cut up the community that make you get on the highway to get back off of it. And they have tolling on 3 of the bridges there. So yeah, we can bring those examples. Councilor Sherman.
I'll just be very quick. So I do want to echo Commissioner Savas from the perspective that having driven across 520 many times, I'm not sure that diversion is even possible in that area. There are no other options. You're taking 90 or you're going up around the north or down around the south. So there's no local diversion opportunities anywhere on 520. So I'm not sure how that would be applicable, but the committee structure might be. So, and that's fine. My other question, actually, I think it might be for Ms. Wills. Did you say that there is, or there already has been draft toll rate modeling done? And if so, I want to see it. Thank you.
That's what we're in the process of doing. Those bullet points that were in red when I walked through the presentation about like, we're going to come to you in May with this information. That's what we're bringing to you, the modeling information on that then shows the traffic, and then the revenue generation and the toll rate schedule, that whole package that's coming soon.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Councilor Baumgartner, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to when you referred to responding to questions. And just as an example, I sent questions that I had asked at the January 19th meeting that we ran out of time at the end of the meeting. I sent them all in an email to Mandy Putney on January 20th and requested actually that they be responded to and sent to this committee so that people could hear the answers to the questions. And I never even had an acknowledgement of receipt or a response to that at all. And I brought it up at the next meeting and it still wasn't addressed. So I'm just concerned. I mean, I want to have a back and forth here, but I also want to feel like we're being listened to, and that didn't really feel like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's frustrating. I thought we did create a document. I remember of Q&As from that. And so maybe that just got lost in internal. We'll make sure we get back to you. We'll go back to you on those questions and make sure we get back to you here within the next week or two.
Okay. Anything to close out, Garrett, on that, or next steps?
No, I mean, we'll send these, we can just email these questions around as well, and yourselves, your staff, that type of thing. If there are other elements you want to see included in that long-term program, Heather and I will work on getting some research as well and sending it out to the group to maybe kind of elicit some ideas on what others have done. And then we'd love to come back next month with hopefully some more of that transportation information, and I think get to some of the type of more specific examples and trade-offs and mitigation, that I think this group really wants to jump into today. So
okay, thank you. And I want to give a huge shout out to Paul, who was standing and rocking the baby and manning the PowerPoint. So you're my hero right now. And thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today. This conversation's a rough one, but hopefully we'll come through it well and things will work out in the end. So thank you for being here today.
thank you.
Thank you. Trent, are we going to wrap up now, or is there more that we should be covering?
That really is the wrap up in terms of what ODOT came to share. If there's more questions, directions, ideas on what this group wants to bring forward in the future, I'm all ears. And I want to acknowledge the attendee staff here as well from a variety of places. I see actually that we lost Councilor Sacco over here, from most of our jurisdictions. And so we'll be following up with ODOT as well next week. We're trying to create like a reoccurring meeting, which hasn't happened yet, but we'll do it to prepare for these meetings in advance. So we're tracking these things. We're helping to, at the staff level, build those models as well. I want y'all to know that we're hearing this elected conversation. We're taking it back to that staff conversation to help prepare for the next elected conversation. So there's a lot of up and down on this, and the team over here in the attendee group is helping with that.
Okay, that's helpful. I think I share everybody's frustration that it feels like we're just talking to this monolithic organization and we're not feeling like we're being heard at times. And I don't want to speak for other people, but that's really my sense. So Garrett, thank you for being here. And I'm hopeful you can take some of our thoughts and frustrations back to your group, and maybe we can have a more productive conversation next time. And Commissioner Savas, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is a comment and a question, and Councilor Christine Lewis made some comments this morning at our C4 Metro Subcommittee, and I appreciate, Councilor, your comments here at the beginning of this meeting as to what may happen next week or may not. I know you understand this pretty well, very well, and our frustration. How can we help you, knowing what you're facing at the Metro Council, And I don't know what the constraints are that, as you shared earlier in this meeting here, that their decision needs to be made by next week or something like that. There's a timing issue. Is that like a rush to the wrong answer that we're all not going to like, or how can we help you, or both?
You know, I don't actually think that the difference between next week and the week after is all that significant. I think we had been kind of in a position, you know, when I went to bed last night, of maybe we're going to do it in the next couple of weeks, or maybe we can do it when we do the funding vote, because again, there's this second wave of funding for the construction side of the project that still has to make its way through JPAC and have a 205 bonanza day. And I liked that idea. But then, you know, in between going to bed last night and now, I've learned that that day cannot happen, because we actually need to have the RTP piece go back to OTC in order for them to be able to do the construction side work. So that is why I think we're limited to the next 2 weeks. And frankly, we're looking at next week because at this point, the difference between next week and the week after is very little in what we're going to be able to get. We're still working on a agreement that will be essentially a letter of agreement, that level of formality that will solidify, hopefully, the Sherman Amendment, as we've been calling it, from MPAC, but also this future revenue decision-making structure, or at least a process towards that structure. So any help in those two areas, very much appreciated. And you know, as I said this morning, at this point, we're having director level conversations. So it should be a letter of agreement signed by the director of ODOT, and hopefully he'll be able to join us as well in whatever meeting we are scheduled for.
Yeah, well, thank you, Counselor, and I appreciate Mayor Walters' word there, monolithic. We want to see some movement. I think we would get some comfort if we saw some substantive movement, but I don't know who they are. Is they the OTC, or is it they, Mr. Strickler? I'm not sure with the leadership. I don't, you know, I just don't understand who we're going to be talking to or who we're going to sign an agreement with in this short of time.
Yeah, at this point, it'll be with the ODOT director. So it's with ODOT. And then obviously OTC has significant roles in these projects, but we don't get a signature from them in this amount of time. So yeah, it is with ODOT. And of course, ODOT's working under their interpretation of the direction from the state legislature.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anything else before we close out today, Trent? We're good?
We're good.
Okay, any other thoughts from the group before we sign off? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Garrett, thank you again for you and your team coming out today. And thank you for everyone else for being here. And I will see you all soon. Take care.
Yeah, thanks all.